Good afternoon, and welcome to the sixth meeting of the Communication Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council 9, which I formally declare to be open. Thank you all for being here today. I ask that everyone on Teams turn off your video and microphone unless you are speaking. And for those in the room, if you want to speak, there's a button on the microphone. When it's red, it's hot or on. So today we're going to be hearing from our working group co-chairs. First, working group 1 is going to present a report on recommended best practices for the FCC and industry on the ethical and practical use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. For deliberation and a vote, working group 2 and 3 will then provide us with progress updates. And with that, I turn the meeting over to Todd.
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you for everyone for your attendance. We've made some great progress. I'm really excited about what the groups have been doing. I thank you all for the amount of work that you've been putting into this and your dedication to the job. So I'm going to run through a quick roll call here. Brandon Abley.
Present.
Brandon. Rob Alderfer is on remote. Praveen from Verizon. Praveen. Mark, she's got him marked, or it is on. Mike Barnes. Mike Barnes. Alexander Laskin.
Here.
Billy Bob's here. Wade Buckner. Wade Buckner. Douglas Campbell. Douglas Campbell. Brian Daly. Brian Daly.
Brian is.
Yeah, just checking. Can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did I miss
thank
a
you.
bunch of others, Brian, that were responding online?
Mike Barnes, present.
And Rob Alderfer.
Okay, great. Thank you. And the ones that I do know are online, we're skipping. So if you don't hear your name, we'll come back.
Is now joining.
Stephen Devine.
Present.
Louise Eduardo. Louise from Hewlett Packard. Ben Goldsmith. Michael Hayes. Michael Hayes. Jason Hogg. Jason. Okay. Puneet Jain. Puneet. Ankur Kapoor.
John Hunter here on behalf of Bonker.
Okay. Thank you. Lauren Kravitz, yes. Tim May.
Online.
Okay. Martin McGrath. Martin McGrath. Leah Misseldine. Leah Misseldine. Douglas Montgomery. Douglas Montgomery. Brian Murray.
Present on Teams.
Okay. Jennifer Oberhausen.
Present.
Scott Paretsky. Myself. Travis Russell.
Live and in person.
In full color, huh? Tim Schramm.
Present on Teams.
Peter Scott.
Present online.
Sean Scott.
Present on Teams.
Ashley Strickland.
Present.
Brian Tegmeyer.
Present.
Rick and Thacker. Riken or Ricken Thacker? George Woodward. Henry Young.
I'm here on Teams.
Okay, great. Did anybody else join that we missed while we were going? Okay, great.
Hey, Young Kim on Teams. My name wasn't called.
Okay,
Mike Regan on Teams as well.
And Susan Miller on Teams, name wasn't called.
Andy
Yeah,
Drost
and,
on Teams
Bob
as
is
Yeah,
well.
if your
You're on
name,
Teams
if
as
you're
well.
on Teams and your name was not called, it's because Corinne and Logan noted prior that you were on Teams.
Thank you.
Oh, excellent.
Just chiming in for Rick and Thacker, Rob Cantu for NCTA.
Thank you. We're good. We have quorum.
okay, great. Just a reminder of the administrative procedures. After the report presentation concludes, we'll open the floor for questions, comments, and deliberation. Place your tent card on end or use the hand raise function on Teams to indicate your desire to speak. So we're going to start off with Working Group 1. The co-chairs are Jen Oberhausen, Vijay Garbani, and Jason Hogg. Jason, I understand, is not here, but Jen and Vijay are going to be presenting the report on best practices for the ethical and practical use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So Jen and Vijay, take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm Jen Oberhausen, and will be starting off our presentation on behalf of Working Group 1, and we'll hand over to Vijay Garbani in the middle once he's able to join. So as noted, Working Group 1 is focused on harnessing artificial intelligence and machine learning to ensure the security, reliability, and integrity of the nation's communications networks. Slide 2. Slide 2, you can see a list of our members, and then slide 3, the alternates who helped us prepare this next report. So Working Group 1 has 3 milestones. We completed our first report in June of 2025 on threats posed by artificial intelligence and machine learning systems to the security, reliability, and integrity of networks, and recommendations on how to overcome them. Today, we're here to present our report on recommended best practices for the FCC and industry on the ethical and practical use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Next slide. So as stated, our objective is to produce that report. And in creating this task, the FCC directed CSRIC to provide recommendations on how to leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to enhance the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of communications networks, and to recommend how policies or programs can be developed or leveraged to ensure that AI and ML is used in a non-discriminatory, transparent, and socially responsible way. Next slide. For the scope of this report, we note that in Report 1, we focused on new and enhanced threats to network operations from the use of AI, both by network operators and by their adversaries. And in that report, we leveraged the DHS framework for artificial intelligence and critical infrastructure. Our primary objective in that report was to identify threats and propose recommendations to mitigate the related risks. In the second report, we recommend best practices for developing and deploying AI in communication systems while adhering to responsible business practices and societal objectives around the use of new technologies. And in this report, we leveraged the NIST AI risk management framework. Next slide. The NIST RMF is based on, I believe we have 7 different characteristics of trustworthy AI systems, and note that it includes being valid and reliable, safe, secure and resilient, accountable and transparent, explainable and interpretable, privacy enhanced, and fair. We also note that the NIST AI risk management recommends using these principles to govern AI, map, measure, and manage the risks. I note that we, as a working group, also looked at other responsible AI frameworks, including from OECD, in Europe, and in the private sector. And the report includes an overview of some of those other frameworks, but we noted that there was a lot of overlap between the frameworks and that we decided to move forward with the NIST AI RMF for this US-based approach. We also note that AI systems are inherently complex, and the exercise of assessing a system's trustworthy characteristics is fact-specific. Next slide. Is Vijay on the, he was able to join? Okay. Okay. Vijay, if you are able to go off mute to present the methodology slide, I'll hand it over to you. Maybe you guys can keep working on that, and I can. Are you there? Okay, I'm happy to keep going. If I don't know if you can try to get him off of mute. Oh, there he is.
I'm here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes. If you could speak up a little bit, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, for some reason Teams is malfunctioning, so I'm calling in on my phone. So hopefully you can hear me. If you cannot, please let me know.
It's a little bit quiet. Yeah, I don't know if it's the room system as well.
I can hold it closer to the mouthpiece. Is this any better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. All right, then I'll get started. Thank you, Jen, and thank you, everybody. My apologies, I could not be here in person. Customer meetings dictated that I stay at home, but let's continue. You will remember this figure from report 1. It decomposes the 5G network into 5 constituent components. The first one, UE or user equipment, is the most visible of the 5G components to the subscriber or the end user. A UE basically sends and receives data on the 5G network. The data can be phone calls, web browsing, gaming sessions, anything that can be packetized. Example of UEs are cell phones, IoT devices, laptops, personal digital assistants, anything that has a 5G chip and can send and receive data from the 5G network. The RAN, or radio access network, links a UE to the network core by managing wireless communications over the air. Backhaul networks transport data from the wireless cell sites and base stations to the core of the network, interfacing with the internet and other networks, as the case might be. And the mobile core is the brain of a 5G network, managing essential functions like authentication, mobility, and session management. Operations System Support, or OSS, handles the behind-the-scenes tasks that keep services active and running efficiently, such as subscriber provisioning, service orchestration, and end-to-end service assurances. So you'll note that each of these 5G components in our analysis becomes a technology area or a TA. I'll be referring to these TAs or technology areas throughout the presentation. In report 2, we've added a new element, the Business Support System, or BSS. A BSS system handles the customer-facing business operations that monetize the new services enabled by the network, such as flexible billing, real-time charging for specialized services, and automated customer management or call centers. The BSS in 5G is the component where generative AI is being adopted for customer-facing use cases, and the working group critically examined 4 different services, as I'll discuss on the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. As we did with report 1, we identified representative set of AI tasks within each TA. This served as the basis for the current analysis. Because the BSS is new technology area that we are visiting here for the first time, and it has ambitious adoption of generative AI and AI in general, the working group outlined 4 use cases. The first one is ASR, or automatic speech recognition. These are machine learning models that convert human speech to its textual counterpart the textual representation is used for downstream services and contact centers, for example. TTS is the opposite. TTS model converts text to speech. So collectively, when a call arrives at a call center, the conversational AI virtual assistant uses ASRs to understand what was being asked, perform some computations that generate an answer, and uses the TTS to convert the answer into speech, which is then played out to the caller. Liveness detection is the ability to use biometrics to determine whether a subject is a real person. Many of you, when you visit your bank sites, are told that your voice may be used as your fingerprint. That's biometric identification of one kind. The interesting development here is that synthetic voice generation models are now capable of generating a very accurate facsimile of a particular human's voice given 10 seconds or less audio sample. Liveness models attempt to distinguish whether a voice sample was provided by a human subject or a synthetic engine that has cloned the human subject's voice. LLM, retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, is an LLM-based technology that retrieves relevant external information from an authoritative knowledge base that was not used for training of the LLM. The LLM then generates more accurate and contextually relevant responses. So going down into other TAs, the UE TA and the RAN TA continued their use cases from report 1, but examined them under the umbrella of ethical and responsible AI ML framework for this report. Backhauls focus for report 2 was a new use case, predictive maintenance and fault detection. This use case identifies failures before they occur by using data analytics and machine learning. 5G Core examined the use case of UE mobility analytics, which leverages both historical and predicted UE locations to improve predicted UE location data to improve end user experience and optimize network resource utilization. And finally, the OSS TA's use case was that of a MOP, or a method of procedure. This is a detailed step-by-step document that outlines the exact instructions for executing specific tasks, such as system upgrades, maintenance, or repair. Generative AI is used here in the form of LLMs to create a MOP or to actually generate code from an existing MOP description. The working group took each use case and evaluated across the NIST risk management framework characteristics that Jen talked about earlier. From this analysis, the working group identified trends and broad themes that were common across the TAs or technology areas. The working group viewed low-risk tasks to require standard oversight, while high-risk tasks, particularly those involving sensitive data or autonomous decision-making, could be candidates for enhanced governance, human-in-the-loop safeguards, and ongoing monitoring. Collectively, we believe that the resulting report offers a balanced, actionable set of best practice guidelines and recommendations for responsible AI integration in telecommunication networks. Next slide, please. I will now walk through two services to give the Council a more detailed insight into the deliberations of the working group. But before doing so, I will outline three scoring categories that the working group came up with. These scoring categories provide finer-grained information on each of the NIST RMF characteristics. So instead of saying that this use case is safe or not safe, we can get better information by looking at these three categories. So type 0 risks are mistakes in implementation of the AI model that can be corrected either with more training data or with a better model training and model observability, or simply leveraging the natural evolution of AI ML over time as new practices and technologies are adopted. Type A risks are existing systemic risks that AI can amplify. Like humans, AI is susceptible to bias, error, and poor performance, but given the scale at which the AI ML models operate, these risks are easily multiplied. Type B risks are new risks that did not exist before AI adoption. AI systems operate by analyzing vast amounts of data. How this information is used to arrive at a decision may not be fully known to the system owner. So these factors introduce new security and privacy risks that expand the network's attack surface. Next slide, please. So I'll take a representative look at two use cases and evaluate them against the NIST RMF, just to give the council an idea of the detail of discussions we had as we were doing this analysis. The first use case is automatic speech recognition. So remember, these are models that convert human speech to text. The risk categorization is shown on the slide. Note that type 0 risk, which stands for correctable implementation mistakes, in other words, risks that we can correct for, the type 0 risk is an invariant across all of the columns of ASR. It exists across all of these categories to indicate that there are edge cases, operational heuristics, model training and fine-tuning and deployment processes that can always be improved. Looking further, these models were generally considered to be valid and reliable as their accuracy in transcribing human speech is generally high. The working group scored this RMF characteristic as type 0, the valid and reliable characteristic as type 0, because there are areas where ASR models can incrementally improve, such as understanding noisy audio, diverse accent, and speech disfluencies. Moving to the second category, the safety category, the working group noted that the use of an ASR in DSS does not directly present a risk to the environment or human life or health. However, ASRs do surface new security risks that did not occur before. I will discuss these risks over the next couple of categories. ASR models evoke type B risk in these next two categories. For secure and resilient, consider that these systems are susceptible to adversarial attacks, such as audio manipulation or audio spoofing. Hidden commands or surreptitious noise patterns in the audio can cause the system to transcribe words that did not actually appear in the audio. This is a risk that did not exist before AI, as it is considerably harder to get a human to mistranscribe an audio recording if the surreptitious information embedded in the audio does not degrade the quality of the audio itself. But the AI models are uniquely susceptible to such degradation given surreptitious information. For the privacy-enhanced category, an ASR may inadvertently record conversations containing background noises or other artifacts which are not pertinent to the transcription task. Human agents performing the same task can distinguish between background audio and the primary speaker and choose to focus on the primary speaker. Additionally, the transcript from an ASR may contain nuances, disfluencies, idioms, and grammatical quirks that collectively form a linguistic fingerprint of the caller. Unlike humans, AI models can match this linguistic fingerprint to other transcriptions produced by further interaction with the same user, creating a privacy risk. For the fair category, the working group noticed that the ASRs perform unevenly across demographics such as gender, age, and accent. While human agents are also susceptible to the same limitations, a type A category was awarded here because even though ASR models are trained on large data sets, their errors across gender, age, and accents are not evenly distributed. Finally, the working group noted that for accountability and transparency, it is the case today that users are warned that their call may be recorded or that their voice is going to be used as their fingerprint. This allows them the opportunity to provide or withhold consent as the need of the user may be. Moving to the second use case quickly, recall that it sought to improve end-user experience and optimize network resource utilization by predicting the mobility pattern of the UE. Here, the working group provided a type 0 score provided a type 0 score for all of the NIST RMF characteristics with an additional focus of type A for secure and resilient. So before the advent of large-scale machine learning, rule-based and statistical techniques using Markov chains existed to predict the user's location. These traditional methods were deterministic and relied on network topology rather than learning from data. So because the risk for mispredictions existed before, but now with the advent of AI, it exacerbates this risk, we decided to go with a type A for secure and resilient. Next slide, please. So this table presents a bird's eye view of the assessment across all of the technology areas and the use cases examined in each areas. I will focus on three key takeaways here. First, type 0 risk is an invariant across all NIST RMF categories. And as you can see, it's present in all of the use cases. This should not be surprising, and indeed, it is expected. As AI ML weaves its way into telecommunication ecosystems, and as AI ML products continue to mature, it's expected that the rules and processes on how to manage AI ML will constantly need to be updated and in some cases developed. It is worth commenting on the safety characteristic. If you take a look at the safety characteristic or the safe characteristic, there's a type 0 in all of them. So all the use cases that the working group analyzed were deemed safe as there is no notable risk to human life when using that service. However, the working group did note that this equation changes when we examine telecommunication networks that carry public safety and other emergency information upon which life-saving operations depend. This will be the subject of the third report from this working group that we will present in March of next year. The second takeaway I want to point out here is that the FAIR NIST RMF characteristic scored as type A across 70% of the use cases. So the analysis across 70% of these use cases resulted in the working group awarding a type A to FAIR. Fairness refers to the ability of the system to deliver results that are free of bias across different populations. For example, the automatic speech recognition use case that we talked about earlier, it was found that upon a customer calling into a customer call center, an ASR may provide below acceptable level of service to some groups based on dialectical factors that were not represented in the training data set of an ASR. To be sure, such differences in services was also evident before the ASR models, but the plurality of human agents handling the calls created enough diversity to minimize non-optimal use. We had a lot of humans handling the calls, so on the average, each caller did get good service. Machine learning exacerbates the fairness risk because the same ASR with the same attendant problems can now scale to handle all of the calls arriving at the call center. The third takeaway is the secure and resilient NIST RMF. So if you take a look at the secure and resilient NIST RMF and go down that column, you will see that the working group scored as type B across 80% of these use cases. So the analysis performed by the working group further provides empirical evidence that the use of AI and ML in telecommunication network increases the attack surface. We know this is true from past studies, but this is further empirical proof that this is indeed the case. Across nearly all technical areas, AI poses new security and resiliency challenges that did not exist before. Generally speaking, this is because AI is susceptible to classes of attacks that AI is more prone to and humans are not. Quick examples are prompt injection and data poisoning. Further, as AI systems function best when given large amounts of information to find patterns and derive trends, it makes it imperative to protect this information while the information is at rest, and indeed in motion, and when it is being used by the AI models to render decisions. So this table essentially is our overall view of the risk assessments across all the TAs, across all of the use cases that we talked about. I will now hand it back to Jen.
Thanks, Vijay. So moving on from these risk assessments, the working group turned to recommendations, to develop recommendations, first for the FCC and then for industry. So I'll walk through them at a high level here. First, the working group recommends that the FCC collaborate with NIST in the promotion of programs to increase the voluntary adoption and use of the NIST AI RMF framework as appropriate to identify and manage risks of AI while still facilitating artificial intelligence's beneficial use cases. Additionally, CSRIC recommends that the FCC closely monitor and collaborate with ongoing and developing efforts at NIST. For example, development of a cyber AI profile and development of 800-53 overlays for AI use cases, and throughout standards organizations such as 3GPP, ATIS, and ISO as appropriate. Additionally, the report recommends that the FCC work with government stakeholders to encourage industry and appropriate U.S. standards bodies to increase participation with international standards development organizations to develop technical standards for evaluating the robustness, fairness, and transparency of models. The report recommends that encourages the FCC to consider ways to partner with NIST and across the federal government to support research and development on the interpretability and explainability of AI models for the telecom networks. And finally, the report recommends that after NIST completes development of the cyber AI profile and 800-53 overlays for AI use cases, that the FCC consider future CSRIC efforts to identify best practices for implementing these NIST work products, and notes that future CSRIC work could include tailoring these NIST outputs for the communications sector. Next, the report looks at recommendations for industry. First, the report recommends that entities within the communications sector that utilize AI have AI risk management strategies and approaches that reasonably reflect the NIST AI risk management framework. The report recommends that entities within the communications sector that utilize AI reasonably conform their AI risk management strategies and approaches with appropriate industry standards as those standards continue to develop. Additionally, consistent with the scope of CSRIC for security, reliability, and interoperability, the report recommends that industry focus on the intersection of AI with cybersecurity to address improved threat detection, security automation, and identity and access management. Next slide. The report also recommends that entities within the communications sector consider and are informed by relevant CSRIC reports that relate to AI and telecom. And in particular, the report includes a list of such prior CSRIC work products that touch on AI, including Report 1 from this working group, which we already highlighted, as well as the CSRIC 8 reports on recommendations on the role of the FCC in promoting the availability of standards for more secure, reliable 5G environment through the use of virtualization technology, the report on how virtualization technologies can be used to promote 5G security and reliability, the report on security vulnerabilities in HTTP2, and the report on challenges to the development of Open RAN technology and recommendations on how to overcome them. The report also recommends that entities within the communications sector monitor and collaborate with ongoing and developing efforts at NIST, for example, development of the cyber AI profile and the 800-53 overlays for AI use cases, as well as through standards organizations such as 3GPP, ATIS, and ISO. The report recommends that industry and appropriate U.S. standards bodies collaborate with international standards development organizations to develop technical standards for evaluating the robustness, fairness, and transparency of models. And finally, the report recommends that entities within the communications sector that use AI regularly evaluate their AI risk management strategies and approaches to ensure that they reasonably reflect ongoing developments with respect to appropriate responsible AI best practices. All right, that concludes our report. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And the floor is open for comments. If you're online, you can use the hand raise function in here, put your card up. No comments? Guess we'll call for a vote then. Those in favor of adopting the report, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Great, then the report's adopted. Thank you very much. Great job. Very comprehensive. Next up, we've got Working Group 2 with Brendan Abley and Stephen Devine.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Brandon Abley, Chief Technology Officer at NINA, and I'll be speaking on behalf of Working Group 2 with my colleague, Mr. Devine. Our Working Group number 2, of course, is ensuring consumer access to 911 on all available networks as technology evolves. Yes, my mic is on, but I can get closer to it. Okay, is the audio better now? Okay, to reintroduce myself, I'm Brandon Abley, Chief Technology Officer for NINA, the 911 Association, speaking on behalf of the work group with my co-chair, Mr. Steve Devine with APCO. Next slide, please. This will, by the way, be a relatively brief report. We're still in the information gathering and research stages. We want to let the full CSRIC know what we're up to and answer any questions, but just for full disclosure, most of our findings and recommendations are still in the very early state. We have our full list of members that I believe we skipped over. You can see them there. We also have our alternates. We've had a few changes just in the last couple of months with staff changes at organizations and such. So those lists have been updated. Next slide, please. So as the full CSRIC knows, we delivered our first report in June. That report for alternative access methods admittedly was very mobile first and very voice centric. So one of the things that we're looking at in the second report is not only to directly address the questions from the Commission for report number 2, but to also complete the work that we had put on hold from the first report. Specifically, the title of the report is Recommendations for Preventing Adverse Impacts on PSAPs and NG911 from 911 calls made through alternative network options, specifically to provide PSAPs with actionable, accurate information, including caller location and source, the call type. Much more on that later. Of call when alternative network options are selected and utilized, and to address any impacts, positive or negative, that these alternative network options might have on NG911. Next, please. So at the time of preparing these slides, we were on the 9th revision of our draft report. That has been incremented as of yesterday, so we're on the 10th revision. We meet roughly weekly. Of course, through the summer, there were a lot of holidays, there were conferences and events, so we did have to cancel several meetings over the summer and coming into the early fall. But we do meet weekly for an hour, very engaging meetings. I'm just so honored to work with such a group of experienced and knowledgeable people on these topics, and even though I convene the meeting and I do a lot of the writing, I assure you I feel like the dumbest person in the room whenever we have these calls. We have the structure of the document stable. We have our contributions identified but still coming in. We have several assignments pending. We're anticipating having by next week a significant volume of work coming in, and from that point, honestly, it's really just project management, identifying resources that can address specific tasks, keeping people accountable, and making sure that they get their work done. And that's what Steve and I are doing and co-chairing this work group. But again, as I mentioned at the opening, the report is still much in the data gathering and planning phases. Those of you that are on the work group or otherwise have access to the draft will see a scratch area that's like dozens of pages long with bullet points about various ideas that will get converted into text eventually. Next slide. So the questions that were asked from the FCC, this is all part of the public release from a very long time ago. So I don't want to read all of these verbatim, but there is some commentary on our approach to each of these. The first regards the information that the PSAP and relevant functional elements associated with next generation core services receive from a backup. We addressed a lot of that, at least with the mobile voice-centric environment in the first report, and we're exploring that for additional modalities and impacts to the PSAP in more depth in our second report. The second bullet, I'm not going to go into great detail about our draft findings because we're still working on those right now, and I can't speak for what the work group will determine in the end. But a big question is, will there be relevant classes of service to identify the source and the call type for PSAPs? So we use class of service in a legacy 911 environment in E911. We have different mechanisms to identify the method and the service type and other informations with the origination type in next generation 911. And we have a lot more flexibility and options. So one of our efforts there is to explain the difference between the E911 environment and the NG911 in terms of identifying how the call was originated and whether it used a backup method or an alternative access method, and how and what that means and what gets displayed to the caller and how maybe the routing of the call may be handled differently, as well as making some of the mappings between the legacy environment and the NG environment, and to provide guidance on how that might be implemented. Very exciting topic. I look forward at the beginning of next year to go into great detail about everything we figured out. We have a question about limitations to backup network services with regard to how location might be handled in ALI and ANI. Again, big differences in NG911, what is conveyed and how. We want to explain and do a similar mapping there, as well as provide advice to the industry, advice to the commission, and advice to the first responder community that's consuming and using this stuff. We have impacts to the issues identified with alternative network options for connecting to 911 and NG911. No great commentary there. And then the last one about the differences in an NG911 environment with respect to how alternative network options deliver information to PSAP. I've already talked about some of that in some detail. That's going to be a theme throughout the full second report, because the changes between E911 and NG911 and your capabilities for alternative network access options are just so much more different and so much more powerful. Next slide, please. So we have our objective, scope, and methodology. What we're really doing here, as it indicates in the first bullet, is that we're investigating how emerging technologies might be used to improve access to emergency calling services in scenarios where the primary network is unavailable or otherwise is unable to timely place an emergency call. We've alluded to some of this in discussing our approach to answering the Commission's questions. The top level headings are summarized in the following bullet points. The capabilities of NG911, the information that the PSAP and relevant functional elements associated with next generation core services receive, particularly with respect to possible degradation of information flow and how to mitigate such degradation when using backup networks. For example, there's a bunch of coverage in the first report about different types of satellite services, including mobile satellite services and supplemental coverage from space. The way that location is handled with SCS, of course, is much different than the way it's handled on a mobile network. And we'll explore these topics in more detail in the second report for other modalities. I've given a preview about existing and potential classes of service and relevant methods and additional data types associated with backup network options. In legacy E911 with the class of service, there are a few different things that are conflated, such as the access type and the location type. It's delivered as a class of service. They tend to be correlated. But in NG911, we can really break this stuff apart and communicate more information and more specific information about the way the call is originated, and that's particularly useful when there's an alternative network access option. We are looking at additional exploration and limitations of backup network options. Again, our first report was voice and mobile centric, and we are exploring additional modalities and expanding on what we covered with mobile in the first report. We also have additional considerations for user device behavior and impacts to the user experience when using backup network options. So as someone that runs a technical standards development organization, you know, our mantra is that we don't design the interface. We don't provide UX, UI people with any instructions. We just explain how it works. But when you are placing an emergency call, you need to have information about what your device is doing so that you have context, especially when it's not working in the normal way that you expect it to. So we have OEMs and carriers and integrators and public safety all in the work group that will provide inputs on the type of information that should be conveyed in these scenarios for the caller and for the telecommunicator that aren't necessarily a good fit for the standards that a lot of us work on in other venues. And finally, this is a little bit out of scope, but we have accessibility issues and capabilities for alternative network options that we have added to our scope voluntarily. Per advice from the FCC, we are allowed to expand our scope if there's consensus to do that and if it's relevant. We've had some meetings with disability experts about their experiences and expectations when making emergency calls, and the types of experiences they might have with alternative network options, or maybe what should be designed for them so that they have the same access to alternative options that people might have in a voice-centric environment. Very exciting. We've worked across a couple of different offices in the FCC on this topic. We've got pages of notes. And the accessibility community is super excited that we're looking at this. So it's something that we care about. Next slide. I've alluded to this, but one of the major points that I want to get across to those that are familiar with the first report is that it is no longer voice-centric. We knew that when we were doing the first report. We had limited time to prepare the report, so we focused on the most common call scenario, which was a mobile voice call. But we have a much stronger focus on other modalities in the second report. We didn't forget about or think that these other call types aren't important. We were just prioritizing our work based on the time available. And again, special focus is given to those modalities that are used by the deaf and hard of hearing community, or those that otherwise, based on their circumstances or capabilities or whatever, may not place a voice call. Next slide. This again just outlines the report structure. There's a bit more detail on some of these. I'll The big difference is I'll draw your attention to the sub-bullets under bullet number 3. Again, we were asked about class of service, but we really want to make it clear how different this is in NG911 and provide recommendations for making that mapping in those migrations. You will see we have method and additional data, and method tokens are mentioned. If you work with me on standards, you know that method tokens are my least favorite thing about how next generation 911 works, but it's been standardized the way that it's been standardized, and we need to work with it. We also have additional discussion about needs for additional data, specifically the field service type and how that's communicated with alternative access. Again, there's a lot more detail to come. Those of you that are deep in the NG911 specs might recognize some of these fields and have your opinions. Next slide, please. So these are just potential draft recommendations. They could change. They could be added to. Some of them might not make it into the final report at all. But the recommendations that we're exploring right now include, as I've mentioned, non-voice centric fallback, especially with next generation emergency messaging. There's a lot of standards development going back and forth between NENA and ADIS and IETF on how to handle next generation emergency messaging in the evolving NG911 environment, and as 5G and 6G and new technologies like IMS data channel are being implemented, and we have standards for all of this that have been developed, but as the industry changes, so do our needs for standardization and policy in the next generation 911 environment. Again, I've talked about modalities. We have a very interesting case that will be really relevant with some upcoming major events, with recommendations to the industry for handling a valid SIM that doesn't have a roaming agreement, and how exactly we handle those calls. With some global events coming to the United States, this is very timely, and hopefully we'll be able to have some worthwhile advice. Next slide, please. The work group. So the work group is still aggressively outlining and planning. Again, we've got a lot of notes. We have ideas. Not much progress in what looks like a final report, but just a lot of notes and research and ideas and citations. We have some contributions. We have some more pending. The two gentlemen representing the work group at the table have commitments to provide a lot of text for a meeting next week, for example, and some other work group members. We're continuing to investigate non-voice modalities and addressing accessibility concerns. That's ongoing. And we have some interesting but not final discussion on topics like some additional possible discussion for Sidelink as an alternative network access option, the use of a temporary callback URI, and whether we need coordination with 3GPP. If you know exactly what that's implying, it's a really interesting problem to solve and provide some advice on. Again, next generation emergency messaging and user interface recommendations. And that concludes my statements. Mr. Devine, do you have anything to add, sir?
Brandon, just to add, thank you. A lot of our discussions have focused on the modalities and the alternative network access and the implications thereof. Not all alternative networks are equal. There's a number of variables that, well, this happens, and then, well, you can do this. So we really are going to have to get our arms around the adjustments we make to provide some degree of consistency in some of the network alternatives and their products with regard to the PSAP and the way that that information is provided. And even Brandon indicated, you've even got within the same access, you've got whether you're on the home network or the roaming network. So there's a number of variables that we have to get our arms around to come up with some reasonable conclusions on what recommendations we should make to promote some consistency. And while Brandon's right, we don't, in the standards space, we don't really promote user interface, but the idea of someone who's dialed a 911 call, and if accessing these network alternatives takes time, that time needs to be represented in some way, shape, or form to make sure they don't hang up and try to call back, which is exactly what we don't want them to do. So, so it's great discussions. We've got a lot of work to do, but I think we've got the right people in place to do it. And thanks again for Brandon for steering the ship and not running us aground.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions or comments from the floor? Anybody online? Yeah, sorry, go ahead, George.
Yeah, without kind of getting into too much specifics, but I'm fascinated by 911 and E911 and NG, of course. You mentioned, Brandon, the non-terrestrial network challenges, and talked a little bit about sort of technical issues. Has your group explored any policy challenges that might be faced both in the broad spread of technical as well as the international or any other inbound, outbound, and call modalities?
Yeah, a couple of questions in there that I interpret. So with the non-terrestrial access methods, our first report did have some policy recommendations, but they weren't as specific as maybe they could have been. They were more along the lines of the commission should continue exploring this topic in this context, rather than like drafting any rule changes or anything that extreme. And the second question, sir, was?
Without getting too technical, any barriers or challenges associated with backups, storage and retrieval?
Challenges associated with alternative network options for storage and retrieval specifically. I'm not sure quite how to address that question with regards to data storage. I can think just from my personal knowledge, like for example, if you are roaming on a carrier that is not your regular service provider, you might have limitations in access to things like additional data that would be conveyed with the NG911 call. Because, depending on your alternative access method, for example, when you place a mobile call, you might not even deliver the proper URI for a callback. And that's one of the bullet points that we had looked at that we're exploring to explain what to do in those kinds of cases. We're not sure how to interpret the 3GPP specs yet, for example, so we're doing some research in that area to see what the support is for a temporary URI that can be assigned to maybe, for example, an NSI device, so that you can actually call the device back. Today, you can't. So we're looking, again, the first report has a lot of examples and use cases and recommendations for a voice-centric environment with mobile calls. And we're continuing to explore that and other modalities in report 2.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, great job. Let's move on to Working Group 3, Brian and George.
Yes, hi, this is Brian Daly. Just do an audio check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So this Working Group 3 is preparing for 6G security and reliability. So on behalf of my co-lead, George Woodward, and myself, we'd like to give you a status update. So if we go to the next slide, please. So just a quick review of the charter and tasks that we were given. Obviously, by the name of our working group, we are to address security and reliability risks that are unique to the emerging 6G networks and services. Now, what complicates it a bit is the term emerging, because as those that follow 3GPP closely are aware, the study phase for 6G has just begun recently, and we're expecting standards to be complete in the 2029 timeframe. So it definitely is emerging, and a lot of forward-looking work that the working group needs to do to account for what may be coming about as we emerge into 6G. We also were tasked to develop a plan for the development and deployment of reliable and secure 6G networks. Certainly we want to minimize any privacy risks, especially with some of the new services that may come about. The commission recognizes that the networks are at least 7 years from commercial deployment, but we are moving at a brisk pace, so we need to start early looking at these technologies and the evolution. We have our milestone for completing a report on potential security and reliability risks in 6G and provide recommendations for mitigation. We're on track for completing this report in December, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. Next slide, please. So I'd like to thank all the working group members and our FCC liaison. We do have some lively discussions and some good input into this topic, and we've also brought subject matter experts in at times to present on specific topical areas. Next slide, please. And again, we have a number of alternates that are also heavily engaged within the discussions. Next slide. So as far as our status, as I mentioned, we are on track for our deliverable in December. We have moved our biweekly meetings to weekly virtual meetings for the remainder of the year, just so that we can complete getting input from the team members and also provide editing of the final report. We have had subject matter experts come in. Most recently, we had Dr. Zhang from George Mason University came in and talked about security and privacy of integrated sensing and communication, which is one of the areas that 6G is going to bring forward. And again, we are on target for our deliverable. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder of the timelines for 6G. The 6G is being driven not only in 3GPP, but by the ITUR timelines, which are targeted for IMT 2030 at the end of this decade and the beginning of 2030. We do have the framework document and the vision for 6G, or IMT 2030 as the ITU calls it. The requirements and evaluation criteria are being developed, which will then lead into the evaluation of candidate radio technologies and finally specification approval. The wheel and pallet diagram, which I've presented before, describes the usage scenarios as well as the capabilities of IMT 2030, and several of those fall directly within the scope of what our working group is covering. Next slide, please. 3GPP is well underway, as I mentioned, in the study phase. The SA1, which is the system architecture developing the use cases and service requirements, does have a study in progress, and that is continuing. The radio interface and 6G core network architecture studies have also begun. They were started in June of this year. Release 20 is the study phase, and those will produce a number of technical reports related to 6G. And Release 21 will be the official start of what we call the normative 6G work, and that will have the first formal 6G specifications aligning with the IMT 2030 submission requirements out of the ITU. The timeline for Release 21 hasn't been finalized within 3GPP. They expect to have that complete sometime by mid next year, and then they expect that the specifications and ASN.1 and Open API freezes will be no earlier than March of 2029. Next slide, please. So as we look at towards 6G, we also have to look backwards and see what vulnerabilities that potentially could be inherited from previous technologies and how we're going to mitigate, make sure those are continued to be mitigated as we move to 6G. So first we took a look at 4G and LTE, and we recognized that these had unprotected control plane signaling messages. The procedures for authentication and connection management had some vulnerabilities. For example, before a secure context is established, a mobile device exchanges a significant number of signaling messages in the clear with the network. And that gave a window of opportunities for adversaries to launch various attacks. For example, by setting up rogue base stations, they could monitor device traffic, determine user locations, intercept or inject malicious messages. The other vulnerability from 4G LTE was the tracking area update, or TAU, lacked sufficient integrity protection for certain messages. So this allowed an attacker to craft a TAU reject message to a target device, which would force it to downgrade to an even less secure network on 2G and 3G, or potentially denying its service altogether. Next slide, please. So as we moved into 5G, each mobile generation has been more secure than its predecessor because we learned what vulnerabilities and what the attackers were going after in those previous generations, and we knew which holes we had to plug. As we look to 5G, the security enhancements in 5G were significantly increased throughout the release cycles of release 15 through 17 on 5G and 18 and beyond in 5G and advanced. And it's expected that 6G is going to be even more secure than 5G. And the chart shown here, and I won't go through the details, but these show the various security aspects that were brought into each 5G release and 5G advanced release. Next slide, please. As we looked at 5G, there was also an expanded attack surface. 5G brought in more virtualization, more software-defined networking, and more cloud-native principles. So this resulted in a shift from hardware-centric to a software-centric paradigm, and that would dramatically expand the attack surface. And what that does is introduce vulnerabilities, which are more common in the enterprise and cloud environments, that brought those vulnerabilities into the core of the telecommunications network. Next slide, please. So as we look towards 6G, we need to understand that the security posture of a 6G network is going to be dependent upon the security of the legacy systems. The evolution from 4G to 5G, and now as we look forward to 6G, it's not going to be a clean replacement, but a process of what we call multidimensional layering, provisioning, administration, resource management, orchestration, monitoring, as well as integration with network interfaces, protocols, device dependencies, and applications. And this will introduce a compounding vulnerability effect where the security posture of a 6G network is going to be dependent upon the security of the legacy systems. And one good example of this, I talked about a 4G network downgrade attack to a 2G or 3G. Well, a 6G device may be forced onto a 4G network by a downgrade attack, and it could become susceptible to long-standing protocol flaws such as the unprotected signaling messages that I talked about that exist in 4G networks. So this is why it's important to understand, take a look back into prior generations, as well as looking forward into the next generation, because a 6G network device may be forced into a downgrade to a prior network, depending upon how networks are deployed. So 6G must defend against these multiple classes of threats concurrently. We need to defend against 4G signaling exploits. We need to understand these cloud and API attacks, as well as the new emergent 6G native threats. And it makes defensive challenge for far more complex than for any single generation in isolation. Next slide, please. There are well-documented attacks that we must mitigate as we move to 6G. The first is location leakage. Consider an adversary that can sniff paging channel messages to link temporary identifiers to permanent ones so they can track a user's presence over time. These active attacks are more potent. They can exploit unprotected radio resource control messages. The attacker can use a rogue base station to force a device to send a measurement report that would contain its precise GPS coordinates, for example. And of course, there's denial of service attacks. I already mentioned about the Tau reject attack, but adversaries can also launch paging storm attacks, where a botnet generates a high volume of paging requests, and that will exhaust a cell's limits capacity and cause delays in service degradation for legitimate users. The next one is IMSI catching and spoofing. In the classic IMSI catcher attack, that exploits pre-authentication messages, message exchanges, so it can capture a user's permanent identity, and that may still pose a threat if devices fall back to 4G network. 4G's text messaging service allows attackers to spoof the sender address of SMS messages, and that vulnerability can also be exploited by third-party services that do rely on SMS for authentication. And some applications that rely on that include social media or banking platforms. Next slide. So key areas of 5G that likely or may be inherited by 6G. When we look at the service-based architecture that was introduced in 5G, there are some threats that the service-based architecture introduces. There are APIs that are introduced within the service-based architecture, and these rely on web-based RESTful APIs for communication between the network function. These APIs can be exploited for data leakage or unauthorized control if not properly secured. DDoS attacks, critical network functions such as the access and mobility management function, those could be vulnerable to DDoS attacks, which can disrupt network access and cripple services. And lateral movement across the core network. If the attacker compromises a single network function, they may be able to move laterally across the interconnected service-based architecture, possibly compromising the entire core network. We also introduced network slicing into 5G, and that in itself has additional vulnerabilities that could be inherited by 6G. We could be looking at cross-slice attacks where an attacker could exploit vulnerabilities in a low security slice, such as consumer mobile broadband slice, and they could pivot and attack a higher security slice if they can exploit those vulnerabilities. Resource monopolization. The attacker could compromise the device within a network slice, consume all the slice's allocated resources, and that will starve legitimate applications or degrade or completely have service failure within that slice. There could be slice management vulnerabilities where if you don't manage the network slices properly, you could allow attackers to tamper with network slice templates, leading to misconfigured or vulnerable slices. Data and security isolation risks. While network slicing is designed to isolate data and provide security, improper implementation or management could allow for malicious actors to access data from other slices or deny access to prioritized users. And finally, slicing does introduce increased complexity within the network, and the complexity of managing multiple virtual networks on a single physical infrastructure does increase the risk of misconfigurations, which could be exploited by attackers. Next slide, please. When we look at edge computing or mobile edge compute risks, there could be exposure to physical tampering and cyber attacks. It does move data processing closer to the user and outside the physically secure centralized data center. That could make edge nodes more vulnerable to physical tampering and cyber attacks. There also is data privacy concerns when you move things to the edge. Moving to the edge may not have the same level of protection as data in the core network, and that could increase the risk of data breaches. The introduction of untrusted components within the edge could expose the core network elements
Is
to
now
risks.
exiting.
Oops. It could expose the network elements to risks such as software or hardware vulnerabilities, counterfeit components, and flaws caused by poor manufacturing or maintenance processes. And finally, decentralizing data processing out to the edge does increase the attack surface, and it may make it easier for malicious actors to exploit vulnerabilities. And finally, virtualization and threats added to the network from virtualization. We could see hypervisor compromise, where attacker could gain control of the underlying hypervisor, and that could potentially allow them to control all virtual network functions running on it, leading to widespread network compromise. There could be configuration errors where the dynamic nature of virtual network functions would increase the likelihood of configuration errors, which could create security vulnerabilities. And software-defined network controller risks. The SDN controller centralizes the network control logic, making it a high valuable target and a single point of failure. And a successful attack on the SDN controller could potentially disrupt the entire network. And finally, code injection in SDN applications. If malicious actors can find a way to embed code in the SDN controller applications, they could constrict bandwidth or disrupt operations. Next slide, please. And when we move to the cloud, that does bring in some cloud native threats. So container and Kubernetes vulnerabilities, cloud native technologies do rely on containers and orchestration platforms like Kubernetes. These systems can be susceptible again to misconfigurations, privilege escalation, and attacks targeting container runtimes or Kubernetes clusters. They are dynamic and complex environments, and the dynamic nature of cloud native environments does increase the likelihood of configuration errors, and that can create security holes. The complexity of managing containers, pods, or microservices adds to the risks. The hypervisor and virtualization threats inherited from virtualization technologies. Attackers can look for compromises in the underlying hypervisor, which will allow them to gain control over all virtualized components, including containers and cloud native functions. The APIs also pose security risks. Cloud native architectures do depend on APIs for communications between microservices, and insecure APIs can be exploited for unauthorized access, data leakage, or lateral movement within the network. And of course, there's supply chain vulnerabilities. As we move to cloud native architectures, there is a reliance on third-party cloud native tools and components, which would introduce risk from compromised or counterfeit software, which could contain malware or vulnerabilities. As we look towards centralized control logic, such as through Kubernetes controllers, these again become high value targets for attackers, and a successful compromise again could disrupt the entire network. And again, we could have lateral movement where misconfigured identity and access management policies in these cloud native environments can allow attackers to move laterally across the infrastructure, and again pose some compromises to the critical system. Next slide, please. Open RAN, as you know, the networks are moving more toward open architectures, especially in the radio access network. This disaggregation does introduce new interfaces that must be secured. This increases the complexity of risk management, as now operators must integrate and trust components from multiple vendors. And that also brings up interoperability challenges, because this multi-vendor ecosystem that is promoted by Open RAN can lead to interoperability issues, and that can thus lead to vulnerabilities if the components are not properly integrated or secured. And trusting components from various vendors, does increase the risk of supply chain attacks, where malicious actors could compromise hardware or software during production or delivery. As we move to Open RAN as well, these will exist on cloud and virtualized networks. These are, again, susceptible to the risks mentioned on the previous slide, including Kubernetes vulnerabilities, container exploits, and hypervisor attacks. The software-defined networking controller, as mentioned, is a potential single point of failure, since that is a high-value target, and a successful attack on the controller could disrupt the entire network. And of course, the ORAN brings in emerging threats. There's new network functions and interfaces that could be exploited by adversaries. And this includes third-party applications, RX and XWraps, in the RAN intelligent controllers. Next slide, please. As we move to 6G, we're going to see diversity in devices. We're going to see more connected devices with a wide variety of form factor and capabilities. We'll have high-end user devices such as smartphones, laptops, and tablets. We'll have specialized devices and use the air quotes as simple as IoT devices and sensors, as well as communications equipment such as switches, routers, adapters, and displays. More complex appliances and apparatuses such as drones, robots, vehicles, vending machines will also exist on the network. So this increase in device diversity, again, increases the threat landscape as you have more devices that are on the network, more devices that may pose security vulnerabilities or bring security vulnerabilities to the network. Next slide, please. And also, as we move to 6G, we are going to see 6G native threat service. This is because we are going to see new novel technologies, which will bring novel risks. The threat landscape for 6G will be defined by the novel technologies that enable its core vision. We're going to see new innovations be brought to 6G, including new radio technologies, pervasive AI, integrated sensing, and also capabilities, new unprecedented capabilities that are going to introduce new categories of risk that we have to analyze and understand. So these threats are going to move beyond the data theft and the service disruption, but are going to include manipulation of physical systems and potentially the erosion of fundamental privacy as well. We're going to see physical layer and advanced radio threats. As we move up in frequency into the terahertz region, we'll see new vulnerabilities emerge. We'll see new threats come about from technologies such as reconfigurable intelligent surfaces as a dual-use technology, as well as ultramassive MIMO. Some of the pervasive intelligence as a target and a weapon will include attacks against AI/ML models, including data poisoning, model inversion and extraction, evasion attacks, and attacks on explainable AI, as well as AI being used as a weapon, leveraging AI to analyze network defenses, find vulnerabilities, and launch highly sophisticated, adaptive, and large-scale attacks that evolve in real time to evade detection by conventional rule-based security systems. Next slide, please. I mentioned integrated sensing and communication, which is one of the new novel technologies being brought into 6G as one of the expanded use cases defined on the wheel diagram out of the ITU. There is needed future work on ISAC channel modeling measurements, evaluation methodology, system and radio access, security, privacy, and trustworthiness highlighted there, as well as sustainability. As we look at ISAC, there are new key enabling technologies that are enabled with that. And as we look at the sensors, how it ties in with edge computing to the core network and applications, all have to be accounted for. And listed in that chart on the bottom are a number of different ISACs use cases, everything from healthcare and well-being to communication and sensing optimization, environmental and public safety, industrial and robotics, as well as transportation and mobility. And each of those have different categories within itself. Just in the interest of time, I won't read through each one, but they are listed there on the slide. Next slide, please. So some of the security and privacy challenges as we look to integrated sensing and communication systems, at the physical layer, we do have passive attacks such as eavesdropping and snooping, as well as active attacks, the traditional jamming and spoofing. At the data layer, we are looking for data security, integrity, and user privacy protection during the collection, sharing, storage, and usage of the sensing data, but is also with the AI model training and inference that is being used to analyze that data. And this could result in a new sensing data falsification layer that could provide false information for the sensing data. And from the regulatory and policy, there's introduces some new areas to consider, including user consent for use of the data that's being collected, as well as the telecom versus radio location rules. Since ISAC is a radar-like radio location function, being combined with the telecom network, how do those rules merge? And finally, spectrum management. The charts on the right show three different types of attack. One where you have an unauthorized passive sensing, where you have an attacker's receiver receiving the sensing RF signal, not as part of the ISAC system itself, but just receiving it as an unauthorized sensor. The second chart shows a jamming denial of service, where you have a jammer presenting a signal that would jam the sensing signal. And then finally, in the last chart, where the sensing signal RF environment is either spoof or manipulated, for example, by a malicious meta service, which disrupts the RF environment and confuses the ISAC system. Next slide, please. So in summary, 6G security and reliability, we are going through a threat analysis to try to identify the vulnerabilities, both from legacy systems, as well as the new risks from 6G capabilities like AI, ISAC, and device diversity. The proposals will include studying some of these new novel use cases, including ISAC and NTN, AI, and revisiting security studies as 6G evolves. In the industry and standardization, certainly advocating for zero trust architecture and ORAN specifications in 6G standards, as well as promoting formalized security standards for AI and critical infrastructure. The emerging threats, persistent threats like the Advanced Persistent Threat or APT, distributed denial of service in insecure APIs, as well as looking at the new vulnerabilities such as the expanded attack surfaces from ISAC AI and terahertz. And what are the use case implications? Of course, there's privacy and resilience concerns for ISAC sensing, including things like drone collision tracking. How does that apply? As well as the national security applications requiring stringent controls. Next slide, please. So the future directions, we are going to be monitoring 6G standardization timelines with the target of 2027 to 30, exploring innovations like AI-driven management, enhanced IoT, and satellite integration, and using frameworks like the STRIDE threat modeling and how that might fit in. And also surveying organizations that are addressing 6G security, as well as developing recommendations for post-quantum cryptography and zero trust in 6G. Next slide. So this is work in progress. This is just the outline for the deliverable, which I just wanted to present for information. And as you can see, we're going through the background on 6G, definition, timeline, security, reliability, and technological innovations, going through the analysis, findings, and recommendations, through a security analysis, understanding the threat actors, what is the security standardization gaps, what's the reliability analysis, and finally coming up with the recommendations and conclusions. Next slide, please. And again, we're meeting virtually on a weekly basis from here through the end of the year. We do have our report deliverable on target, and we hope to present that at the December meeting. And with that, I believe that is the last slide. So let me open it up to my co-chair, George. Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Thank you, Brian. Again, very nicely done, extremely thorough, and there's not a single thing I could add to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I could even follow along with most of it. That was really, really comprehensive and great. So any remarks or comments from others? Anyone online? Fantastic. Billy Bob?
Thank you very much.
Great. So just to wrap up today, just want to continue to say thank you for all the hard work that you all are putting in. I am 100% positive that everyone has been very attentive to news articles this week talking about kind of the nature of the threat environment that we are in, which we have talked about on several occasions. The work that you all are doing is absolutely critical at this stage in our nation's history, and I couldn't really be more proud of the FCC for your standing up and taking on this leadership to bring this group of experts together at a time when the nation really critically needs the insights that they're developing. Thank you all.
Thank you, Billy Bob. I appreciate that. And thank all of you for all the effort that you put into CSRIC work. CSRIC reports contain a wealth of information and guidance that the Commission regularly relies upon. Importantly, I was thinking about this, and importantly, these reports provide the opportunity for the Commission to understand the lens through which the Commission's stakeholders and partners look at these issues. And I just think that's a particularly important consideration when thinking about how to read these reports and what the purpose is and why they are so important. Just my own thoughts. So I look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting, which is going to be held on Friday, December 19th. Trying to give Brian and George as much time as possible before the holidays to get that report to us. And
thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Yes, I know. Okay. So with that, this meeting is officially concluded, and hope everyone has a safe trip home. Thank you.